I remember waking up like at 4 in the morning. It was unusually windy.
I had this feeling in my body that I can't really explain, but as the day continued to unravel, it all made sense.
And as I was heading home, I received a text of a big cloud of smoke saying, "Have you heard what's going on?"
The winds were hurricane winds, and for me that day was a hurricane with fire, which is indescribable.
That morning of September 8th, I actually woke up at 5 and laid in bed wide awake. There was just really intense winds outside, so I decided to record it.
My girlfriend stopped by my work and actually was like kind of encouraging me to go home early and get my son, and like evacuations were coming out all over.
You know, most people say level 1 is just like be aware and have an evacuation plan, and I said level 1, I'm not going to wait for level 3.
Within 15 minutes, we had our friends show up at the door and say, "We got to go right now. This is getting a lot closer and a lot bigger."
You know, then like the planes started to come, the helicopters started also around. The ball of smoke was bigger and darker. There's still no alert.
Looked for information, there wasn't very much coming out.
There wasn't a lot of information being publicly available. We found out actually most of it through Facebook, which is really not how you want to be finding out.
I don't really know what's going on because I can see smoke. Nobody's really talking about it here on campus. And my wife said that she hasn't heard anything as far as, can I get home?
I was listening to the police scanner the whole time for the news since someone had suggested that. And I was listening to all the streets I'm very familiar with here in Talent, including my own street that I live on, saying structures are on fire, people don't have vehicles, we need to get people out, we need to get people evacuated.
One of the firefighters that they knew from the area had called them from the truck and said, "You need to get out right now, and that no one's coming to tell you." And so that's the warning I got.
And you could tell that there was a lot of tension because this guy comes out, he's like, "Do you live around here?" And I was parked on the outside of the orchard, and I said, "No, I'm just waiting." And he was like, "If you don't live here, you can't be here."
The mobile park, it was starting to burn, and it was so bizarre, but I remember like this black cloud covering the sun, and it was totally pitch black it was just a couple seconds, but it was so vivid.
Many of our community members don't speak English, don't have internet, don't have any way of getting any life-saving information. I immediately started getting on my Facebook and just translating whatever I knew was going on into Spanish on my live feed. No one who we had called had heard anything about the fires.
Yo estaba en mi casa y miré carros de bomberos y muchos carros. Y yo jamás pensé que iba a pasar. Yo me fui tranquilo para Medford. Cuando me habló mi hija que era orden de evacuación, entonces yo tampoco lo creía, no hacía mucho caso.
My dad was like, "Oh, you know, there's a lot of firefighters here. I've fought these wildfires. Someone's going to take care of it." He was really optimistic about it. And what I think I knew that he didn't was that in terms of climate change and the differences in weather patterns, the differences in humidity levels, that day humidity was between 1% and 6% in the valley, I knew it was going to be bad.
And I was just in tears at that point as well, just knowing how much of the community was literally going up in smoke.
And as we were right about to leave, my partner called out to me and said, no, come here, come here, come here. And so I run upstairs, and up in our upstairs we had this wall that whenever we had family members come, they would sign it in silver Sharpie. This was our first home. We never thought we'd be able to have a home that was ours, and so it was really a part of pride for both us and our community. And so we had, you know, for the last 2 years that we had lived in this house, we never had to sign it. It was our home. We got to look at it every day. And so my partner throws their hand up on the wall and has me throw up my hand on the wall and traces it out in the silver Sharpie and gives me a kiss and says, "Never forget this was our first home," and then we leave. And that was the last time I was in my house.
Well, the wind that night was unstoppable. And yeah, I decided to grab my bicycle and go check it out and like go see what's going on. And the Facebook Live, the stream seemed like the best method to get this information out. Wow, it's pretty crazy over here. Yeah, I started getting questions in the comments and I would try and answer those, and people would ask if their house was okay, so I might ride over to that neighborhood and tell them either it was okay or it wasn't. Giving out the bad news that night was really difficult. If it's across the street from 704, it's on fire. I think 709 Talon Avenue is gone. You know, everything down there is on fire. That's what you're looking at right now. It's all gone. Azalea is gone. I'm sorry to say that. I could feel my body and my heart kind of numb out a little bit that night. I'm so sorry to everybody that's lost their homes in this fire. I don't even know what to say. There was like a time when I was riding down Talon Avenue on my bicycle and I could look up and see stars and perfectly clear sky. And then just like 50 feet or 30 feet over was this like raging inferno with black smoke billowing up and all of the, you know, terribleness of the fire. But because the wind was like so strong, it was contained in a certain way. Where I'm at, the air doesn't really smell bad. It's kind of amazing. Like, it's all clear over here. I can see the stars. I'm not going where the air is really bad. I remember riding through embers like flying through the air and thinking, oh, maybe this isn't quite so safe. It is seriously raining fire. There was things exploding. And you could feel them and hear them, and car tires would pop. You could see those. I watched a couple of those. You could get close to something with a false sense of safety, and then if the wind like died down a little bit, the heat would start radiating out from it really quick. Whoa, this one's really hot. Holy crap. You can see I'm like kitty corner across the street. It's almost making me sweat. In a way, I kind of wish I had showed up earlier in the night. Like, everything was pretty much just going, and the firefighters had to, I mean, I hate to say this, but they basically had to give up on it. There was no way to stop it, and, you know, there was other fires that were manageable that they were attending to. And there were still quite a few firefighters in Talent, but they were really just protecting like things that hadn't burnt down yet and not trying to put fires out that were going on houses. That was actually something that was a little sad. There was a lot of people blaming firefighters. Boy, these guys are doing the best they can, I'll tell you. What I saw were firefighters that were exhausted and defeated. And to be like truly defeated and exhausted is not a situation I would ever wish on anybody. I'm filming and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think its address is 237. I'm like, 237, your house is okay. Not for long, right? But it's still standing. 237 Talon Avenue, okay so far. Going over Wagner Creek right now. And my friend was watching the video live, is a neighbor to that person and friends with them, and texted them and said, hey, your house was just in this video and it's still okay. So then they watched the video and came in, and he like knocks down the fence that's on fire, knocks down some fires that are like on his yard, and saves his house, and is like able to fight the fires off of his house and save it. That video actually may have literally helped save somebody's home that night, and so I think that was like the little story that made it really feel super worth it and important. And I don't know how many people learned from that their house was destroyed or okay, but probably hundreds. Yeah. Half of Talent is going to be gone, at least half the city. At least half the city. Thanks for hanging out with me on my bicycle. I hope I could help some people know their place is safe, and I'm sorry for everybody that lost their home tonight.
What a week after that. I remember the next day, it was perfect. It was like the perfect storm. The sky was blue, everything was clear. And then the next day after that, everything was so smoky. It was so dense. You could smell the plastic, you could smell the asbestos, you could smell like the gnarly, nasty things. Like, it wasn't a wildfire. This was an urban fire, and you could definitely tell it was an urban fire. I wanted to help out. I mean, a lot of people got affected, but a lot of people of that community was Hispanic. And as Hispanic myself, I was like, well, I want to do something. So I went to El Tapatío, and I connected there with some beautiful people that were as well in service.
Aw, Daddy's on the cover. Oh, we'll meet this friend. He'll be so happy. So I was hearing and seeing and people telling me, I have all these resources, I have all this stuff, I don't know where to take it. And I had my family and friends who were suffering, didn't know where to go for help. And I was like, we're just gonna be here, be the little glue, I'll be the bridge, I don't mind. We announced it, and oh my gosh, I immediately started crying when I was driving in. It was cars, like we had easily 200 to 300 families show up, and the only thing they had to move around was their cars. And so they were just parked up along like Highway 99. The whole lot was filled, our whole grass area was filled, all the parking lot. It was just overwhelming because we wanted to help, but we just realized we don't got it right now. So the community saw, everybody that was driving up into town were seeing, and they were like, there they are. We've been looking for you guys. They're like, we have a theater, like at the high school, they're like, we have a theater full of donations. They've just been sitting here and we know where they're coming now. So can we bring you some stuff? And I was like, please. I have a lot of families that are looking. We need as much as we can get right now. So just bring it on in. You know, it's the community that was mainly hit is my family, is my uncles, my aunties. Each and every day they tell me what happened, what they went through, and I can feel their pain.
Not to mention that for a minute, this was not considered a wildfire, this was actually considered a crime scene. So till that actually went through, there was like all these, rumors that FEMA was not gonna help, that the government was not gonna help, and it's like, what do you do in this case?
And some families have decided they're not going to apply for federal aid because they don't want to risk getting their information to a department that also sees them as criminals worthy of being deported. You know, I've done environmental justice advocacy for years, so I'm not surprised when it's our communities that are hardest hit, and it's our communities that don't get the support that we need to actually respond in an appropriate way. We lost a lot on September 8th, but we could have lost a lot less. Some people didn't even get to take their pets with them. Some people weren't allowed back into their neighborhoods. Even mothers who had children in these mobile homes weren't allowed to go back and rescue their kids. Like, that just, it feels like they don't care about us, you know, or they don't consider us, or they don't think that we exist and that we're worthy of having things in our mother tongue.
No creo que nos den el valor que nos merecemos. No creo que nos den el valor que nos merecemos. La verdad. Somos los que tenemos peores beneficios que todas las otras comunidades.
Our community, our Latinx community here in the Rogue Valley, picks this valley's grapes, picks this valley's hemp, cleans the hotels, works at restaurants. We work in all the essential industries to make this economy work. We're talking about almost like over 2,500 structures that are gone. A lot of these mobile homes were built in the 60s. I know the one that my mom lives in was built in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s. So these were old mobile homes. And my dad, the past 20 years, he spent his time taking some of these mobile homes and refurbishing them and rebuilding them so that they didn't just get demolished and end up in a landfill.
Y aquí he trabajado en todos estos lugares. Trabajé primero plantando pinos en la montaña, en la reforestación, y ya después me dediqué a la renta de los mobile homes y hacer rebuilding los mobile homes. Y yo fui perjudicado por las lumbres, se me quemaron 14 mobile homes, más el casa donde yo vivía también.
Even though these mobile homes were only valued at $2,000 or $3,000, if you walk into any of these and you see them, a lot of these had new floors, new doors, new windows, new kitchen appliances. So the value of them was a lot higher than what they were actually appraised at. And that's another concern that we're seeing, is that a lot of the family members who are trying to apply for FEMA, who do qualify, are only getting $3,000 for a mobile home that they had added more than $30,000 in value. You can't expect a family to get $3,000 for the mobile home and still be able to get a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house in the Rogue Valley.
There are things about insurance that, as a first-time home buyer, we didn't understand. So we only have a year in a lot of this. A year to rebuild, a year worth of housing expenses, a year worth of all of this. Which, if we were the only house that burned down, isn't a big deal. A year is completely reasonable and super understandable. However, when you have 2 towns that have burned, there's no way in 1 year they're going to rebuild all of those dwellings. And so at a certain point, we're going to be paying a mortgage and either rent or a second mortgage or whatever it is for us to live, right? However we are finding a way to live, whether it's a trailer spot or something like that, like we're gonna have to pay 2 things because our mortgage doesn't get put on pause. You still owe all that money. I actually had the woman who sold us our insurance tell me, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." That's what it is. And that's great, but I still have to figure out the next 3 years of my life.
Me quedé sin casa, andaba viviendo por aquí y me fui a vivir a otra de mis mobile homes porque me quedaron algunas y yo pude construir mi propio apartamentito, un cuarto con todo su baño y todo, y ahí vivo ahorita. Pero yo, porque tenía los medios, tenía la sabiduría de trabajar en construcción, tenía la experiencia, por eso pude hacer mi propio lugar donde vivo. Pero mucha gente no puede eso. Todavía anda sin casa, todavía está batallando, todavía está pagando miles de dólares en los hoteles y se están quedando sin dinero. La situación sigue difícil aquí. O sea, somos pocos los que hemos tenido el medio económico como para reacomodar nuestras vidas. pero toda la situación sigue mal y el dinero se acaba.
After our house burned, I had family members and my partner went to see it. I had no interest in looking through my ashes. I had no interest in sifting. I had no interest in finding what we had once before and reclaiming that. However, 4 months, almost to the day that that fire had happened, my aunt, who was extremely close to me and was more like an older sister than an aunt, had committed suicide, and her ashes had been in my house when it burned. And you always think, oh, if anything happens, I'll remember to grab X, Y, and Z, but you don't, because your brain's not working, because you just grab what's close. And so I had said goodbye to that. The chances of those being available were slim to none. Sifting through those ashes wasn't gonna bring her back. But as I was standing in front of my house for the second time crying, I found myself walking over, kind of backing around to where the bookcase had been, what her ashes had been on. And I stood in the corner of my foundation and I just looked at the rubble, and sticking up out of the ashes was this thing that looked like a pipe. And human remains, when they're cremated, look very different than burned house. And when I looked in this pipe, I said, that's Nina. And there, over half of her ashes were. And I was able to put one foot into the rubble and grab her out. I still don't know what I'm gonna do with them, but they're not 100% in my old rubble heap, so solace there.
Not everybody copes the same. Like a lot of people that were around me were drinking a lot. A lot of people were just pissed and angry. Others were just like in total shock, like nothing has happened.
What happens when the dust settles, right? What emotions come out? You know, if you think about the grieving process, anger, denial, self-blame, you know, what could I have done differently? We're going to have to be aware of that, in my opinion, for the next 3 years, and possibly even more.
No, pues mi miedo es que yo ya tenía visualizado un futuro muy grande, hacer más negocios, crecer, porque ya estaba mi negocio muy bien para estar creciendo un nivel muy alto. Y de repente regresé a 30 años para atrás económicamente. O sea, se me fueron todos mis ingresos, los fuertes de mis ingresos, y eso es injusto lo que pasó. Es injusto. Y yo sé que no soy el único, que fuimos muchos afectados, que trabajamos mucho y ya teníamos nuestra casita pagada, ya teníamos nuestros carros, ya teníamos todo pagado, esfuerzo de muchos años, y en 3 horas, ¡boom!, no hay nada. Todo se fue, y eso es muy injusto.
We're a small town of about 7,000, so when the coronavirus hit and everybody felt very isolated, that was hard when you're used to walking around town and going to restaurants or seeing people in person. And then on top of that, so many places being closed or not being able to operate was economically hard for our businesses to stay open. And then even if they made it through that, then we get the fire situation, and that, you know, obviously literally burned through businesses that aren't in existence anymore.
I'm scared. There was a lot of people who were hit by this who, for whatever of their own reasons, didn't have a bank account, and so all of their savings was in their home and everything burned. I'm scared that those people will not recover. I'm scared that people won't rebuild, or if they rebuild, it will be not for the best of the community, but for the best of themselves.
Because I was having a conversation with somebody and it was like, we could make a lot of money. And I said, what does that have to do with the people that have lost? Because if the people that have lost take a back seat to making money, then there's a huge problem, because the people that have lost should be the biggest winners. The people that have lost should not continue to lose.
When we started looking into what rebuilding might look like, we actually happen to know people who lost their homes in the Tubbs fire. And so it is a community. Once you go through it, you want to support anybody else who's going through it. And luckily, people have been willing to talk to us. And so when we're first getting out of this, everyone's saying, oh, we'll be back in our house within 1.5 years. It won't be a big deal. And yet we're talking to other people in a community that had residential damage, and they're just moving into their homes 3 weeks after we had our fire. So that means over 3 years. And there's still people who don't even have the rubble cleaned out.
I don't know the stats as far as how many people have relocated or how many people have moved out of the area. I think that there is going to be an opportunity for people to lean on their community and say, I want to stay, but I don't know how to stay. I feel like I need to leave so that I don't remember this, or I feel like I need to relocate. I think those conversations are going to be important. You face so much trauma, you face such a tragic situation that it's not easy to think, I should rebuild here. It's easy to think, well, I should go away. I just hope that they relocate and stay in the Rogue Valley. There's so much history here. Like, there's so much history here, and we can't lose that.
There's just nowhere to run. I know I've heard a lot of folks in Ashland are making plans about leaving or making the great exodus out of the valley, and I'm telling you, there's nowhere to go. Wherever you go, you're gonna find climate change in a different form. If you go to the south, it's gonna look like hurricanes. Here it looks like wildfires. Islands, it looks like sea level rise. So we can't run from this. We have to stand our ground and defend Mother Earth because our life depends on it. You know, I was on a call yesterday and folks were saying, oh, we can't use that land for temporary housing, or federal government won't buy it because it's on a floodplain. I'm like, well, everything's gonna be on a floodplain. We need to plan like climate change is coming. We can't just dismiss land because it's gonna be on a floodplain. How can we build? How can we change the way we have built things before to actually make it possible for structures to be resilient to these changes that are coming? Not rebuilding is not an option. We have to rebuild, we just have to do it in a wise, future-informed way.
It's not going to go away. I agree with you about that. There's still so much fuel, you know, like as I look around, even just there's like some little hills around Talent, and they're just, you know, rich with fuel, underbrush, and you know, I don't know when we stopped letting things burn the way that nature's intended it, but that was a bad choice. So I do hope that somehow our community is able to put together a better emergency system. And I know there's been some controversy around that locally, saying that it didn't work correctly and that it failed, and they're trying to point fingers. But there does need to be a little something better. It can't be citizens riding around on bicycles getting the news out. Even though I'm up for that job. But it's not the right answer. There needs to be a better system somehow.
How do you make it so you can rebuild in a way that's even better than when you left it? And that's what I hope, is I hope that what comes out of this is bigger and brighter and better, not just for myself, but for the entire community. We get a clean slate, and I hope that everyone has the ability to take advantage of that.
And it's not impossible. We just need to be made a priority, and when we're talking about rebuilding, we need to start from the ground up. When you rebuild something, you start from the ground up. You don't start at the top. My hope is that rebuilding can lead to folks having ownership of their own land and their own homes. To have to pay 50% of your wages every month to rent, it's not a solution for folks. It'll keep our communities in economic poverty. And I say economic poverty because our communities are incredibly wealthy in culture and spirituality and tradition. We're just exploited. Our labor makes the rich richer and keeps us having to work 2 to 3 jobs just to be able to live. those who want to help can support in really investing in helping our people move into ownership. Like, I started to do the math about just in one mobile home park, if you have 100 mobile homes there and they're paying $500 a month in rent, that's over $500,000 a year that our working class communities are putting in the pockets of private owners. And what we need to do is have investors invest in us so that we can pay rent into our own pockets. I mean, think about what a family of 5, a family of 7 could do with $50,000 a year.
I feel like sometimes it's even more important the continuous than the immediate. Because in the immediate, everybody's there. But in the continuous, everybody goes on with their lives. And that's when the solitude comes in and being like, oh wow, I don't have anybody. But you have a whole tribe.
I see people waving to each other and being friendlier than they ever have. Not that they weren't before, but it's really emphasized now that we're in this together. And behind me is the Flags of Hope project. This came before the fire, and yet its purpose is even greater, I think, and magnified because of the situation we find ourselves in now with the fire. Like, this is an example of our community coming together and really expressing what hope means to them in words or in pictures or in some sort of impression that they can put on a flag.
We're all trying to do everything we can. We don't care about anything else. And if there's a language barrier, like, we're here. Like, that's why I was born. I like to say, you know, that's why my parents came here, for a bigger, better life for their children. Okay. So we were able to be those translators and be that glue. That's the Latinx generation, because we have a bigger voice than they realize, than we all realize. And I didn't know this until this happened. And so now, oh, we're gonna get this ball rolling.
Pues ya nada va a volver a ser igual que antes. Yo quedé como esquier con el calor. El próximo summer yo voy a andar sí, esquier, asustado. Mucho cuidado, mucho así. O sea, no va a ser igual que antes. Pero hay que tratar de... Que esta es mi casa. Oregon es mi casa. Y quiero mucho esta tierra. Ya tengo más de mi vida aquí, más de 32 años aquí, hijos aquí, nacidos aquí, y estoy feliz aquí en Oregon.
One thing that I've learned in the whole process is that home is here, in my heart, where I am, and if I stand grounded and I honor how I feel, I'm even more grounded. I mean, right before the fire, I was in this totally uncertainty of, I don't know if I want to stay in Oregon, I don't want to I do want to stay in Oregon. If it took the fire for me to realize that, it took the fire for me to realize that. How can you find the gift of a loss? You know, when something bad happens, and that's when you actually kind of like can take a fresh, deep breath. Hopefully, this will be the beginning of a beautiful journey for all of us, and we can find the gift all together.